You are watching Xirtus.
You kind of
Like,
remind me of Ludwig, by the way. I never thought
he's the
about
guy
it.
who did the Boltzmann brain
Yeah,
because he
totally.
figured that if the brain is possible, then according to probabilities, a brain would just snap into existence with no previous evolution tied to it. But what that also means is like anytime an event happens, it's 100% chance that it would happen. He's also one of the guys who is behind the whole idea that if you put like 1,000 monkeys with a typewriter on an island and left them there for like 1,000 years, there's a possibility that they would write like Finnegan's Wake or a phone book. Or
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying? That all came from Ludwig, based upon the fact of probabilities is that in any system, some systems will already like snap into order. And this has he was one of the main proponents of entropy. See, there's a bunch of problems that have to do around entropy. Like the second rule of thermodynamics is that everything will slowly go from order into chaos. But then we have theories like evolution, which go against the second rule of thermodynamics. And Boltzmann was kind of obsessed with these ideas and concepts and trying to work them out in mathematics. And he came up with like the Boltzmann equation or equilibrium or something. It's called something like that. I mean, all of this stuff kind of leads to Nash and John Nash and game theory and ideas of that. And there's also quite a few like Christian evolutionists who kind of use Boltzmann's theories also. Like there's evidence that certain species that drop out of the fossil record will suddenly reappear in the fossil record. And Boltzmann would use probability to state that, but some people think that it's like almost like spawn points or something. It all leads kind of to, or all akin to simulation theory. But
Right, but it doesn't it kind of remind you of sync in the way that it's an acknowledgement of there being a higher order, and that we approach it, but then really like no matter what the appearance, we're still governed by those higher principles, right? So
I mean that's the only reason like I really like hung on to Boltzmann is because there's sync ideas there, you know.
Yeah.
Like I will center in on these different scientists and really like just dig into everything they got. And then, of course, I did the same thing to like Philip K. Dick and David Koresh, but it's almost like useless information. What I was really, really wanting to come on and say, because you guys are batting around that, is not everybody knows everything now. Like the whole thing with like JFK, that shit's been out there. And then I found shit in there and I was like, well, fuck, nobody knows this. Like there's certain things about David Koresh that are not on the internet. And I even was talking to this professor of the history of religion about Koresh because she studied him since 1993. And I'm like, how do people not know this? And there's secrecy works better than people think. I mean, there's secrets. It works way better than you think it does.
Yeah, I've been coming across this issue so much, like especially lately, it seems, where there's this assumption that people have that everything exists on the internet, like information-wise, like data, like, and you've like, well, come across something, you're like, dude, I can't access this through Google. I'm sorry. Like, it's like even like scholarly interpretations of different works and different things that you would think would just be like, oh, you just type that into a search and
this used to be the most abstract concept of like if a tree falls in the woods, does it? But now we can see the actual version of that, and it's what you're talking about. If we're in a coffee shop and you make a claim and I can't, or none of us can look that up and find it on Wikipedia or Snopes or Google. Is it really true, David? And I feel like that it's like a tree fell in the forest and no one was there to hear it.
Right.
Well, there's a certain amount of responsibility as researchers. We have to make up our mind on what's true or not. But there's like a weird thing. This was taught to me by Sync because there was everybody who just assumed what the reasons were. Like there's kind of like two different camps, right? There's the idea that sync is intentional and done as some sort of like predictive programming or whatever, which probably could be true, but a lot of people are very convinced of that,
right?
Camp.
Is that not the role of Echo is to provide that sync like intentionally?
Right. I mean, well, we don't
So this
know.
time.
Like, we don't like. It's very possible that this is a natural occurring thing that other people figured out before us and used intentionally. And the same way that, like, you know, that their public relations was probably called something else back in the olden times.
Propaganda.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, that's
we know
literally
certain
what it was
things are
called.
not. Consensus is confused on at least UAPs. You get what I'm saying? Like, if you don't think secrecy works, secrecy worked for 70 fucking years. Like, it worked. The common consensus was that you were crazy if you talked about UFOs. Now that's all. It was like Obama came out and said it, and it's all of a sudden everybody's like, oh yeah, well of course. Well, of course.
Dude, isn't it freaking weird that like leading up to the election, people were tripping out over like UFOs, and then we just get to find out like what today that it was just like it's now completely acknowledged that those were all got permission. They all supposedly came from us, and this was like so basically they admitted it was a psyop on some level, like without like that's. There was
we know that they're admitting to fucking with us to a certain degree.
Yeah, and even they're like, oh, we gave people permission to just participate in this thing or whatever, like private and like public. Like that's weird, man. Yeah. So what the hell? Like
we that's the problem though. It's almost like we have that things are happening so quick that we are adapting to this shit and not going like, oh wait, that this was considered out there 5 years ago. You know what I'm saying?
New Jersey, so New Jersey flying UAP phenomena were given green light by the FAA for what they call research purposes. Why couldn't Biden just inform the public? Right. Crazy.
Right. And what was that? What were the specifics of that research? Can we look at that? I'd be interested to know. I'd like to see. Those are some documents I'd like to look at if that was actually something that went across somebody's desk and they're like, "Oh yeah."
It feels like War of the Worlds, like Orson Welles.
Yeah, totally.
Podcast. It feels like that's what they were doing. You know how that's considered to be a psyop in and of itself. Like,
I feel like that would have been like a side aspect of it, though. It's like, oh, you're doing this. Well, that would be great if we just don't tell anyone, because now as you're doing your practical research, we can piggyback on that and do a War of the Worlds sort of part 2 for no extra cost.
Right. This is like a poor man's Project Ludwig.
Who's more likely to vote for who based on the UAPs? You know, like would this make you vote for Trump more if you were an American, or for Biden more? What do you think?
Again, this could be a hostage crisis situation where it's like, vote for me. I'm the guy that'll look into this.